Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show.
You meet someone online and there's this instant connection. It's amazing how much the two of you just seem to click. They live somewhere far away and there's some plausible reason they can't travel to meet you. They tell you they're in love with you and you feel optimistic for the first time in a long time. They have a successful career, yet somehow they need money from you to solve a short-term problem, always with the promise of paying you back. Time goes on and they need more money more urgently. You've started to see the cracks and begin to wonder whether they've been lying this whole time. All of a sudden it hits you. You've been scammed. Fool Me Twice is the story of my mother, Jules Hannaford, a woman who was drawn into the dangerous world of sweetheart scams. After a trip overseas to meet a stranger, a dangerous altercation in a Manchester hotel room, and thousands of pounds lost for good, she's here to tell her story. Fool Me Twice, a true crime podcast, is available on Apple Podcasts, Ozcast Network, and anywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Today I'm here with Virginia Chan again. Hi Virginia, thank you for joining me again today.
Hi, thanks, Jules. Thanks for having me on.
So it's so great to have you back, and you featured episode 80-something, do you think it was? And it's called Humid with a Chance of Fishballs. And that is your business. But we've got you back here to talk about your experience starring in a Netflix series. Congratulations. How did you get involved with this series and what was it called?
It's called Restaurants on the Edge and it's streaming worldwide. It was a staggered rollout and it premiered February 28th. But for Canada, it just launched March 14th, Friday.
Oh, so it's just come out in Canada.
It's just come out. And so actually it was really funny. The casting producer was actually on a Hong Kong Facebook group and they had posted a message about how they wanted recommendations for different restaurants that had maybe a view. And I was one of the ones that actually gave her a proper answer. And then nothing. I didn't hear back from her at all. And then I went on vacation to Phuket and that was about a month after I had replied to her. And then I got an email from her saying, hey, it's a month in. We've got a 10-person crew coming into Hong Kong in about a month's time, and we have no restaurant casted. And she's like, we're having a lot of difficulties with Hong Kong, mainly because they were looking for obviously local restaurants. And no one here has heard of Netflix or they weren't interested.
Isn't that interesting?
It's super interesting. And obviously she was based in Toronto. So she was using a long distance number. She was calling these restaurants and people here, I guess they're more skeptical and they thought that she was a scam. They were asking her up front, like, oh, do we need to pay for this? Or they're like, we've never heard of Netflix. And I think with Hong Kong, it's because the rent here is so high. So any given time, a month's rent could be like $250,000 Hong Kong dollars, about, 60 or 30,000 USD. And so for them to have to close down their shop for maybe a week's time, for them, they actually want an actual guaranteed ROI or like a return over investment. So they didn't get a lot of interested participants and a lot of them actually spoke Cantonese. So if they answered the phone, you were speaking English, they're just going to hang up on you, right? So she really needed someone to come on and help her and be on the ground in terms of helping her cast the restaurant. There was never a guarantee or a thought that they would put me on screen. I was actually brought on, funny enough, just to help with the casting of the restaurant.
Oh, right. I didn't realize that. For the listeners out there, you have a business called Humid with a Chance of Fishballs, but that is really a mobile restaurant, isn't it? You don't have a one place where you take people for bespoke dinners or lunches. Is that right?
Right. So even on the Restaurants on the Edge on episode 2 in Hong Kong, they titled me as like the street food expert, which is great because for us, we're a food tour based company, but at the same time, we don't really go to, I guess, like fine dining restaurants because I feel like you could do that on your own. But what we really try to do is really try to bring out the stories and the food and the places that we go to. So we definitely want to talk to the owners. We want to give a little bit of a historical background to like this place, even though it looks like a hole in the wall, it might look like there might be a cockroach, somewhere in the alley, but they've been here for about 20, 30 years. And that is a huge evidence or huge proof that they have good food, or else it wouldn't last that long in Hong Kong,
Yes, you
right?
can always look at the restaurants that have the most customers and know that they've got great food no matter what it looks like.
Right. And
Yeah.
I know for other people who maybe they're based in Canada or the US where cleanliness is something that's maybe seen differently or they have a different definition, they would be really scared to go to these places, especially since it's not really an English menu. They do it their way. There's a lot of yelling, there's a lot of back and forth, there's a lot of pointing. And so they would be scared. And that's what we're trying to do, which is bridge that gap, the East and the West gap. And also just to make sure that it's not just food for us. We use food as the tool or the platform, but we really want people to eat through Hong Kong's heritage. They eat through their traditions and the culture. So we use food, but we're trying to get people to learn about all these different things.
You were then the ideal person to take them to the streets of Chim Sa Choi and try different street food for the show. You were kind of like a special guest on the show, but you weren't the featured restaurant. So did you help them find this featured restaurant that was out in Tai O, wasn't it? Tell us about that and how did it come that this lovely quirky couple where this tiny little restaurant in Tai O became a featured restaurant?
Right. So, like I said, when she had reached out through email, it was about a month before they would fly into Hong Kong. Quickly, I was in Phuket at that time, but I remember getting on a WhatsApp call with her and having a call with her. And basically, within a couple of days, she had already sent me her Google Sheets, which had, I don't remember now, but it had like probably 60 to 70 options of restaurants that she wanted to either connect with or maybe she thought was a potential and she wanted me just to look through. Most of them I knew, some I didn't. Then I added more. So I remember being on the beach in a resort, having a cocktail, and just literally opening Google Maps and just looking anywhere where there was blue and shoreline, just zooming in and to see what kind of restaurants that might be there.
Oh, because it had to be restaurants on the edge. It had to have a view.
Yeah, one of
Right.
their criteria was it's called restaurants on an edge. So their criteria was that it had to have a view of some sort, preferably obviously a sea view. So it's on the edge of the shore or like edge of the land. I had looked at Kennedy Town, a little bit closer to where Little Creatures was, but obviously their criteria was that the restaurant couldn't be successful. It had to be a restaurant that maybe was a little bit struggling with a few renovations or a revamp in the decor or the menu, something like that. It could get them going again. So it couldn't be like terrible, but it couldn't be amazing or newly renovated. So it was a matter of honestly just looking on Google Maps and looking at everywhere. I had actually pinpoint as well a place further out in Lantau. I think it's called Cheongsa Beach, but also logistics wise, it's a 10-person crew with a lot of heavy camera equipment. If their hotel was based more centrally, then logistics wise, like how long would it take for the crew to get to the restaurant, vice versa. So that kind of came into play as well. And so initially, we were looking at other places that were over at Kennedy Town. And then it was actually near the end when we almost had a couple of finalized shortlisted candidates that we decided to visit Tayo because the casting producer, she really liked the area. She thought it was really quaint. She thought it was really charming. And I'm like, yeah, it has a lot of historical backbone to Hong Kong because it's a fishing village. It talks about one of our earliest clans, the Tanka and the boat dwellers. It would be really cool. But we couldn't really find a restaurant there. And that's when she talked to maybe senior management or her boss, and they said to open up the search. Previously, Tai O Banyan Tree, which is the restaurant they casted, it was seen more to be as like a bakery or it was seen more to be like a retailer. It was less like an actual full scale restaurant. So they had maybe skipped over it. And then we went back to it. I remember the casting producer telling me that the couple was not comfortable with speaking English. So that was also a thing. So we're like, why don't we just do the screening with them in Cantonese first? So I was actually the first person to talk to them because I did the screen with them in Cantonese. It was either WhatsApp or FaceTime or something like that. And I had to record them, and then I kind of spoke to them, hear about their story. And then we did all of that in Cantonese. And then afterwards, I would get on a call with obviously the casting producer and I would give her like the rundown. That's what we did for the first week after I met up with her or I connected with her, was me just going through her entire Google's list, calling the people that I could, eliminating the ones that I thought was no, that wouldn't be a very good place or establishment, and then really refining that list until we got some shortlisted candidates, like maybe 5 to 10, and then doing pre-screens for all of them. If they could speak English, then she would take it. If they wanted to speak Cantonese, then I would take on those ones. So a lot of my efforts for Restaurants on the Edge was actually through the casting and working with the casting producer. And the on-screen bit that you saw was actually added in much later on and was a little bit more impromptu and spontaneous.
Oh, how cool. Wow. I had no idea that you were so deeply involved with it. That's fantastic that you're like a Netflix producer. Really, you were in a production role. How did you then decide for the Banyan Tree restaurant finally? Did you have to convince them to speak English on camera?
I think that I was more of a doer. So there were things that need to be executed. There were interviews that need to be done. And then the shortlisting or the person that they picked or the restaurant they picked, that was obviously out of my hands. That's not something that I had a say in. So, for example, I do remember sometimes when we were going through the options, I do remember saying that I feel like perhaps that the restaurant owners that we pick should be more locally Hong Kong versus maybe an expat. And this is everybody's different opinion, but I felt like it would be a little bit more Hong Kong if you found someone that was like locally born and raised in Hong Kong and have them showcase instead of maybe someone that was an import into Hong Kong. That's how I felt. But they wanted that person to be English speaking. For them, they had maybe thought about having it subtitled, but I think that maybe stats have shown that people don't like it subtitled. And so they were really hoping that maybe the owners would be able to speak English. If you've seen in the show, Clifford and Charlene can speak English, so it really worked. And I think after I did the screening with them, I was just blown away by their story. They are such
They
a
are
cute
so
couple.
cute, aren't
They're
they?
really cute. And
Yeah.
so their story really captivated everybody. And it was just them.
They were such a good fit,
Yeah,
weren't they, for the
they were a
show?
very ideal fit.
Were they thrilled with the outcome? Have you seen them since, or do you know how they've responded to the changes that were made and the new menu and the facelift that the restaurant was given?
Yeah, so I had actually filmed a kind of like behind the scenes with them in October because we knew that this was going to be launched in winter 2020, but we just didn't know when it was. So I was like, oh, let me speak to you before you get super busy after it launches. So I went back to their place in October of 2019 and I sat down with them and we talked about it. And Charlene said that she was very thrilled with, especially the coloring, the painting of the walls because that's one of her favorite colors, that sea foam green. And she never actually articulated that to the producers, but they just, when she saw it, it was like just perfect for them. Their backspace, their terrace is so nice now. They've put the fake plant or the grass wall. It just looks really pretty. The only thing was when I visited them, they had converted because I didn't see it right when it was released. So I wasn't part of the crew when they did the unveiling or reveal. But I didn't realize that they had extra chairs in the middle, like a more seating room in the middle, because I know they've converted that more to showcase a little bit more of their merchandise. So I don't know if they're going to reconvert it back after they've seen the success of Netflix. I don't really know. I haven't visited since
Yeah, they
October.
might need to convert it back because they'll get more business. I wonder if their business will grow from it. I bet it does. It could become kind of a little tourist attraction out in Tayo, couldn't it?
Well, I know for a fact that their Instagram following has grown quite a bit because I remember connecting or following them at the beginning. And I think maybe they've had 1,000 or so. And now if they've grown upwards, a couple of days ago, I've looked at, they're at like 9,000 or something.
Oh my
So there's
gosh, that's
definitely
great.
been obviously exposure for them.
Great.
Yeah.
Tell me how the street food part came about because for me, you were the highlight of the show. You really were. It was amazing. First of all, I want to know how it came about and then how you decided which of the street foods to pick. And did you showcase a whole lot more and did they cut it down or what made it onto the show?
I think that it is a little bit more planned than what people think it looks like. What I mean by that, like I said, there was no guarantee that I would be on screen. But when they finally casted the restaurant, then the casting producer said, let me introduce you to the story writer and see. She's like, no guarantees, but I'll try to recommend you to see if you would be a good fit on screen. So I had a talk with Josh, the story writer, and he thought it would be a good idea to put a street food segment into the story just because food is such a central role in Hong Kong. It plays such a huge role.
It's so unique as well. It's very unusual, the foods that you showed to him.
Right.
Yeah.
For us, we decided to go to Sum Sui Po, and that is a little bit of my own personal reasoning and a little bit of logistical reasoning. And the reason why is because we were filming the baking segment right before they would come over to the street food. And the bakery is based in Mong Kok. Technically, with a crew of 10 people, we needed somewhere that was generally close by. I had thought about maybe doing it directly at Mong Kok, but I just feel like Mong Kok is so touristy and it's so played out, meaning that most of the travel shows that come to Hong Kong go around Mong Kok. And you ever watch any Hollywood films like Doctor Strange while he opens the realm of Hong Kong? It's usually Mong Kok that looks like it's been the inspiration. So I wanted something that was a little bit more authentic, that was a little bit off the radar, but that was a little bit closer to me. And I picked Sham Shui Po because one, it's close by, but two, I have a food tour around there. And also my dad actually grew up around there. So it's closer to my heart. And also with Sham Shui Po, I knew they wanted something that was TV friendly, meaning that it has to have a lot of visuals. It has to have that vibrant personality. And I thought Sham Shui Po just really fit the bill because there's just so much noise and lights and just everything around Sham Shui Po.
It really did have that, didn't it? It was really, really brilliant to watch. Like I was thinking, wow, Hong Kong looks amazing in that section. How did you then decide where to go and which foods to show this guy?
Then I got down with Josh, and obviously he wanted the street food segment to be inspiration for the chef Dennis, right? So I then went down and I think I put together a tour of maybe 10 places. And a lot of them were really truly local Hong Kong classics like fish balls, right? Humid with a Chance of Fishballs. I had to include fish balls, and that's the number one most favorite loved street food in Hong Kong. But at the same time, given that it's TV, obviously they want something a little bit more like for shock culture or for entertainment's sake to watch the chef eat something really exotic. So that's how we got the snake soup in or the intestines into kind of the whole tour. So there were 10 things, and I think several things were maybe like tofu pudding, things like that. Then from those 10 foods, we then consolidated the list to about 5 places. And then we went through the entire tour with those 5 places. And then they only, I think, showed about 3 of those places because it was probably the most entertaining or the ones that they felt really added value. Because with the curry fish balls with the skewers, that was inspiration for Dennis's last dish with the skewers and the noodles.
Yes, so they made connections with the other segments in the show as well, didn't
Correct.
they? And then they used the snake soup because of the unusual element, I guess.
Yeah, I guess they just wanted something that was unusual for a good soundbite or whatnot.
Yeah. Did he really enjoy it, or was he faking it for the cameras? Or are you not
Everybody
allowed to
asks me
say?
that. I don't really know. I mean, he's Canadian, right? So they're very polite. I mean, I'm Canadian as well, but they're very polite. But he did eat a couple spoonfuls. But with snake soup, to be very honest, it really tastes like chicken noodles. So it's not too different
Unusual,
or
yeah,
unusual.
okay.
It's just
Yeah.
the thought of eating snake. I think it's the before that's scarier than the after.
Were you disappointed that your business didn't get named in the show? Like, did you drop it in anywhere and then was it cut out, or were you not able to say it at all? I was really expecting them to say, and our street food expert, Virginia Chan from Humid with a Chance of Fishballs, but they didn't.
No, they didn't. And I mean, to be
Drats.
say that I wasn't disappointed, obviously would be an obvious lie. They asked me for our logo. They asked us for our contact info. So I always thought that we would be put in. I thought maybe under my own byline, they put our company into it. And that's why I didn't wear a company t-shirt because I just felt like, oh, I didn't want to look too cheesy. I just wanted to look a little bit more, I don't know, like hipster, kind of more cash.
You did look great. You did look fantastic. You really scrubbed up so well. But do you regret now that choice of not wearing your t-shirt?
Yeah, probably. I kind of regret. Maybe I should have just branded myself with like a bag or something. But they had initially told me that at the end they would have a scene where he would collect all the souvenirs or everything that he's been through, like the Dennis. And then he would look at all the things and then he would find inspiration. So I had given them our company magnet. It's a mahjong tile made into a magnet with our branding. And I thought that would be shown. And I thought that would be all okay. Obviously, it wasn't. So it is what it is. I mean, I was on the show and a lot of it was because I wanted more exposure to our company, right? So more people would know about us so they could take a food tour with us when they're in Hong Kong. And it's a little bit sad because they also didn't mention my occupation. People may not know that we run food tours,
They
but
did say you were a street food expert, though, didn't they?
right.
That was good.
That was
But
very
did they
good.
say your full name?
I don't think they said my full name,
Just
but
Virginia.
I do have a very slightly more unusual or less common name. So I think if you did Google my name with the show or some sort of pattern of that, then I would hopefully pop up. I mean, it's still great that I was dubbed like the street food expert. So don't get me wrong, that's amazing. But then it's just hopefully if people want to do a food tour with us, hopefully they understand that we do food tours and we run food tours and that you are most welcome to join one of our food tours.
Yeah. And at the end of the show, you can give your details and I'll also put it in the show notes so that our listeners can find you and your food tours.
Perfect.
How long did your whole filming session take?
For the street food segment,
Yeah.
it was about 3 hours.
Oh, okay, great. So they're pretty efficient. Does it inspire you to want to do something similar to this again? Or would you like to start your own TV show in Hong Kong? Like, you've got some hosting skills. You're very articulate. You don't stumble over your words. You're really quick on your feet. You're beautiful. You're smart. You could do it. Come on.
Oh my goodness. I love you. You are like my little cheerleader that I should put in my pocket.
Yeah. So if anyone's wanting somebody to host a Hong Kong food show on Netflix, I mean, we've got Netflix Singapore, haven't we? You never know, or even on one of the local channels.
Oh,
I
yeah.
hope they'll reach out to you.
Oh, thank you.
What was it like to watch yourself on the Netflix program?
Daunting. I've been on other productions like YouTube videos before, and I get really nervous when it gets released. So I obviously aggressively advertise for people to go watch it and that we're on. But I personally myself, I don't watch it until my friends egg me on. So when it was released on that day, I was actually at home playing mahjong. Not that that's recommended nowadays, but that's what we were doing. And all my friends wanted to watch it. And I'm like, no, we can't watch it. Not if I'm there. And they all went home and then they sent me print screens and they sent me comments. And then eventually I'm like, oh my God, I need to watch this to know what they're talking about. And then I watched it. But usually I give it about a day or two before I actually watch it. I'm just really scared of, I guess, coming off as maybe too knowledgeable, like I'm a know-it-all, or not knowledgeable at all, like a ditz, or maybe I come across as maybe not friendly. I'm just so scared of, with the internet, you never know how it's going to spin. I'm just so scared that maybe I've said something wrong, that I've offended someone. And so I get really nervous. And then I'm like, oh, I got to suck it up and I got to watch it
Yeah.
or else I won't have any idea what people are talking about. And then I finally do it.
Were you proud of it when you saw it? Because they did a good job of putting it all together, didn't they?
They did. It's so funny because when you're actually filming, you don't actually think it's going well. For example, I mean, it's 3 hours. Obviously, they try different angles, they try different things. You take, you redo, things like that. And sometimes you're like, oh, that wasn't so natural or it didn't go on. But then at the end of the day, a lot of that effort really comes from the editing. So it's from 3 hours. They've condensed it to about 10 minutes or so. They've really taken the most entertaining and the best bits. And then all the bits that you're really scared and nervous about, obviously, then they don't show it. So, yeah.
What sort of feedback did you get from friends who watched it?
They know I was really nervous. And then they said that I didn't appear to be that nervous.
Not at all. I didn't think you appeared nervous at all.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was their thing. And one person was like, oh, you're really ambitious to wear a white t-shirt for a street food tour with curry and everything. I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
That's so funny. Had you actually eaten snake soup before?
Yeah. For our private tours, some people like to be really exotic or very adventurous. Snake soup is something that I generally would maybe take them to or recommend. One thing I haven't done before is I've done the snake gecko wine, but I haven't done the snake penis wine, which is what the one that we were looking at with Dennis on the show, but we didn't end up having. I've never had that myself.
Okay, but that featured on the show, didn't it?
We talked about it and we pointed to the jar.
Okay, but you didn't try it?
We didn't try
it. Why not?
You really want to know the real reason?
Yeah.
I had plotted the route and the snake soup place was first on the route. And then we would end with the bakery where we would get milk tea and pineapple buns with butter. The only thing is then I remember that if we had to do the shot, I am Asian and I don't have the enzyme. So I get really red in the face. and I didn't want to look red on screen. So it was when my vanity that I asked the producers if we could switch the order of the route. Obviously, then they would ask me why. And then I told them, I'm too vain. I want to look pretty on screen and I don't want to be red and flushed. And they just took it out instead.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Good point. For listeners who are not in Hong Kong and don't have Asian friends, many Asians, when they drink any alcohol, go very red. It is called the Asian flush. Okay, that makes complete sense. Can you kind of just describe how a shooting of a scene works? What's it like? Is it tedious? Does it take a long time? Is it quick? Give me a bit of a rundown of, say, how one shot was filmed.
Everything kind of went really quickly, and I don't know if I've grasped everything, but from my experiences of maybe filming with a YouTuber and also this TV show, a lot of times they do the beginning, and maybe this jargon is all wrong, but they do establishing shots. So it's kind of like us walking through the streets, looking to your left and right, looking like really engaged, something that's really interesting to the left and the right, but not looking straight at the camera. They do those scenes first. And then maybe the entrance scenes, so walking in and out of the restaurant, they do that as well. And then you sit down. And then with them, they actually have color board or the color bars, and they make sure that the colors are all right. And then they really do the 1, 2, 3 action thing, which I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then we get started into the conversation. So none of it is scripted, but Dennis just goes. And then sometimes they might come back and they're like, oh, we want you to talk more about this direction. Or they give him some sort of cue about, oh, think about maybe the family values of this. And then they'll let him do it again. Or they might try it from a different angle. And then at the end, they might do the filler shots, I guess. It's the one where, for example, they'll be like, okay, Virginia, you're talking and he's listening. So I'm just talking about random things and they're doing a wide pan of us. And then like, okay, switch. So he's talking and then I'm just nodding and listening. And then they kind of put those throughout the entire scene, I would say.
Also close-ups of like the snake soup and things like that.
They do that at the end too, as well, with the
Okay.
YouTubers as well. They do that at the end with the sexy shots of the food. And I don't remember because it was all just a blur for me. But sometimes I know with other people, they might get a whole entire new bowl of it. So it looks nicer. And sometimes they might use the same bowl that we've been eating from to do the food shots, the close-ups.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, of course.
You were. And
Throughout
did you?
the entire thing,
All right.
yeah.
Did your nerves ease as you went along, or not really? Because you covered it very well.
No, I think I was just nervous throughout the entire thing. I remember telling myself to suck in my stomach or like, don't let my double chin show and all those different things, or like, don't say stupid things on camera and things like that. So I was just talking to myself throughout the entire process.
Cool. How many cameras did they have?
That I don't remember. Maybe 1 or 2. I think there was a main one and then maybe there was another side. I actually don't know for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about your business. Has it been affected by the coronavirus in Hong Kong?
Yes. I mean, to say no would be obviously, once again, a lie. So we were
it's actually a stupid question. Like, of course it has. But tell me how it's been affected and what impact it has had.
I think we were already affected maybe 6 months prior to that with the protests, right? Obviously, we were
We've had a
affected.
double whammy this year in Hong Kong, haven't we?
Yeah, 2019 and 2020.
Mhm.
So the protests, we were affected. I think it wasn't too bad. For me, out of the whole 6 months, we've only had to cancel about 3 tours or so. And I think that point in time, the tourists were more concerned and I wasn't concerned. I was like, you know what? There's a protest schedule that comes out. I am on the ground. I have all my ears and nose and eyes on the ground. I know where they happen. I can get you in and out. It's completely fine. And I think they were more concerned. But now that the coronavirus has hit, I think it depends on your level of risk. Or are you risk averse? Are you not? Because my grandma's actually been here during SARS. I know that they were very, very scared. So I think that kind of the same level of not paranoia, but like being very cautious kind of rubs off on me. And so we've actually canceled all our tours for February and March. We have some people that still ask us if we're running tours or they book. But for me, it's just, I don't feel 100% safe to let either myself or my guides run a tour just because there's so many people that are traveling around. And also because we had relatives visiting us. So I had someone that was over 70 years old in our house and also a 3-year-old as well. And they're just the most susceptible. So I think it was just right for me to obviously cancel all of our tours. That's not to say that everybody else has done it, because everybody, like I said, has a different level of risk in their mind and how risky it is to run a tour. But yeah.
And I think that looking at how things are going, now Hong Kong has just declared every country as a red country, and that everyone who flies into Hong Kong as of Thursday night has to quarantine. This episode will be coming out later than this, but at the moment, currently, everyone has to self-quarantine for 14 days. In the next couple of days, that will start. That just shows the severity of it and how cautious everyone's being. And I think if you look at all of the stats and how well Hong Kong have managed it, they've been making the right decisions so far, haven't they? You're probably following guidelines and doing the right thing for yourself and your family and your guests and your guides.
Right. And obviously, like I said, there's so many different topics that are very controversial, like the schools closing. Should they have closed? Should they have not closed? Mask, are you supposed to wear them? Are you not supposed to wear them? And I guess like do anything that makes you feel protected, I think. Makes you feel safe is the right way to go, I guess.
Totally agree with you. And I think that's really good advice. Tell me a bit about when you start again, once this virus has calmed down a bit, will you roll out all of your tours at once? Will you start with some of the key ones? And have you given that any thought yet? And tell us a bit about which tours you offer for our listeners.
Yeah. Actually, I haven't even thought that far yet into whether or not we would be rolling everything out at once or just doing a couple of tours. This virus, it makes
Could go on
things
for a
change.
long time.
Yeah, and it changes things from like if you've talked about it maybe 5 days ago, it's completely different to what the landscape looks like now. And by the time this airs out, we don't even know how it's changed. So I think that I'm going to just assess it. And when the time that I'm comfortable to roll out tours, then I'm going to just maybe play it by ear or make my decision at that point in time. But in terms of the tours that we have, I guess, two sections, and it's a little confusing, but we have private tours and we have public tours. So public tours are the ones that are great for maybe solo travelers. You just want to go on a tour, meet other people, have a great time. So you book without knowing who else is going to be on that tour, and you go as a small group around. Those are kind of what we call like walking tours. We don't really ever sit down at only one restaurant, but we go to maybe 5 to 6. So we have them around different areas because it is a walking tour. So for example, we have one around Wang Po, which is our signature one. And that's like a deconstruction of Cantonese flavors. So there's 5 of them. There's like bitter, spicy, sour, sweet, and salty. And each stand is focused on one particular flavor. I call this our intermediate tour. And we do it around Wang Po because that's where I live. I love Wang Po, and I've always wanted to be like that Wang Po ambassador. So that's what I'm really trying to do. And it's such a residential area that is so cool because you can actually see the real local daily living life and how a local really lives in Wang Po. But it's also got a lot of different hubs. So it's got the hub where it's a little bit richer. So it's a little bit more established. And that's near where the mall that looks like a ship is. And then we've got the more like public housing estate area. We've got the industrial area. So it's really good because it's like a nice little neighborhood that has a lot of things to look at. Then we have another tour, which is our more, I guess, basic tour. And we eat all the basic best of Hong Kong things, classic Hong Kong things. And we do it around Sam Shui Po. So we are eating, barbecue pork rice, wonton noodles, egg waffles, everything like that. But we do it with a twist, meaning I bring you over to Sam Shui Po. It's one of the poorest areas in Hong Kong, but I find it to be so quaint, so charming, and so vibrant and full of personality. And that's why I like to bring people over there. And then lastly, we have one over at Kowloon City. The reason why is because my grandma actually lived in Kowloon City for a number of years. And so I find Kowloon City to be really cool because it's a local haven. We call it the little Thailand of Hong Kong. And so over at Kowloon City, it's a deconstruction or it's a retelling of Hong Kong's history, but through all the ethnic communities and their foods. So we eat Thai food, we eat Chinese Islamic food, we eat maybe something that's inspired from the British, which are the egg tarts, and we talk about it. So we're eating all these foods that isn't quintessentially like maybe Hong Kong, but it still plays a big role in Hong Kong's culture. Like the communities have played a big role in Hong Kong's history.
That's brilliant because we are such a multicultural community. So that's such a great idea. And do you still have your sampan dinners?
Yes, I still have my sampan dinners over at Causeway Bay and the Typhoon Shelter, but those are what I call dine-in experiences or the sit-down experiences. Those are good for people that maybe they don't want to walk so much because our walking food tours, we walk around 3 to 5 kilometers in maybe like 3 to 4 hours. But with our dim sum and our sampan tour, it's basically an experience where it's like a dining experience. You sit down at that one particular restaurant and it's going to span 2 to 3 hours.
Oh, it sounds amazing. They're so great. So if our listeners want to get in touch with you and find out more, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can find us by various social media platforms. For our website is humid with a chance of fishballs.com. And then for our Instagram is I like fishballs. And then for our YouTube and for our Facebook is humid with a chance of fishballs once again. And so, like I said, obviously business has been down and a little bit slow throughout these past months. So I've actually been making YouTube videos on YouTube. So if you're interested to see how we were fighting for toilet paper or like lining up for masks or just a lot of Chinese New Year's customs and educational videos, then you can check us on YouTube.
Is that still called Humid with a Chance of Fishballs on YouTube?
Correct, yeah.
Cool. I didn't know you were doing that. I'm going to go home and check it out. That sounds very cool. Want to see some toilet paper fights.
I was at the right place at the right time because all I wanted to do was take a video of how emptied the walls look without the toilet paper. And then in came like a whole carton of toilet paper. And suddenly there was a huge frenzy that I managed to videotape. And then I was like, since I'm here, I might as well get 2 rolls. Turns out they're like green tea infused. So I have green tea infused toilet paper now.
I've never heard of such a thing. Why do you think everyone's panicking about toilet paper?
I have no idea. I'm like, you're in the washroom near the shower. If worst comes to worst, then just jump in the shower. I just don't understand.
Yeah, I think it's a really unusual phenomenon, which seems to have started here. I'm not sure if it started
We're
in
like
China.
trendsetters.
We trendsetted it, and it's just gone wild. Like in Australia and America, everyone's fighting for toilet paper. I thought it was because China had shut down and the toilet paper factories had shut down.
That was a rumor.
Yeah, that was a rumor. So I think that might be why it started. But then I think maybe it's a way of people having some kind of control over what's going on or some sort of comfort in feeling like what they see as a necessity. I don't know. It's an interesting psychological phenomenon, isn't it?
But I just feel like so many things are manufactured in China. So if you're scared of the factory shutting down, then you should be hoarding up on
everything,
right?
That's so true.
So it's really interesting on Instagram. I know this Instagrammer, she was like, tell me what people are hoarding up on in your country. So we hoarded up on toilet paper and instant noodles. But say, for example, and face masks and anything antibacterial, but that's, I think, universal.
Mm-hmm.
But over in, say, for example, America, it's like frozen foods and stuff. And then maybe over in Europe, it's bread and milk. So it's really different to what people are hoarding up.
Such an interesting byproduct of this global pandemic, which is happening, which I'm going to be discussing next week on the following episode, actually, by the way, with a psychologist. So that's going to be very interesting, just about the psychological impact of the coronavirus. So yeah, tune into that next week. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, what is the name of the Netflix series for people again? Let's remind them so they can go and check it out.
Yeah, so it's called Restaurants on the Edge, and I am featured on the 2nd episode that is in Hong Kong.
Right. Yes. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Go and watch it, guys. And Virginia does an amazing job. Finally, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's really, really wonderful to have you here. I love chatting to you. I'm going to ask you 4 secret questions for my Patreon supporters. I've got some fantastic, wonderful supporters on Patreon, and they pay as little as $1 a month to then access all of the secret questions from all of my guests. So listeners out there, if you'd like to become a patron on Patreon, please go and check out Patreon Hong Kong Confidential and sign up for as little as $1 a month, and you can access Virginia's secret question answers. And also for the last 10 episodes, you can access all of the secret question answers from my wonderful guests. If you could share this podcast with your friends and help get Virginia's Netflix series and her business, Humid with a Chance of Fishballs, out into the world so that people, when they start visiting Hong Kong again, will have something amazing to do, because it just sounds absolutely brilliant. And please go to iTunes to rate and review us, because it will help get my podcast and Virginia's business up on the charts.
Woohoo!
Thank you so much, Virginia. It's been absolutely brilliant. My patrons will see you on Patreon.
See ya. Sounds saucy.
Woohoo. Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.